I practiced the piano for 12 hours a day, and wherever I lived, I was met with complaints. The agent told me there was a property on the outskirts that would be perfect for me, rent as cheap as cabbage, excellent property management, and most importantly, no living residents, so noise wasn't an issue. At first, I thought no living residents was just a joke, but when I moved in, I found it eerily quiet. The garage was devoid of any cars, and the ground was completely empty of people. The security guard looked at me like I was some kind of otherworldly being. It wasn't until even food delivery services refused to come that I started to sense something was off. I asked the guard, "Didn't you say the units were all sold? Why is no one moved in?" The guard blew a smoke ring and said nonchalantly, "They're all occupied. You've got to be kidding. I haven't even seen a shadow around here." The guard chuckled, "Ghosts don't cast shadows." A chill ran down my spine. "What do you mean?" The guard said. "I'm not trying to scare you, but the owners here bought these units just to store ashes. It's just the two of us who are alive, the so-called columbarium apartment." After a moment's thought, my initial shock turned into joy. How great! No more neighbors complaining. I could play piano as much as I wanted. The thought of all the ashes in the complex resting to the sound of my music made me burst into a wide grin. The security guard thought I was crazy and rolled his eyes, saying, "Good if you're not scared. If anything happens, call the duty room." What could possibly happen? My top priority at the moment was practicing the piano. The audition for the Dream Theater was in a month, and I wanted to become a pianist there, something I'd dreamed of since childhood. I had put in more effort than most people could imagine, but my teacher always said, "Fu Wenxia, you play well, but you're still missing something." That something was intangible, impossible to see or touch, and hard to describe. My teacher said, "Listen to Xiao Lang's performances more. His passion comes through in his bones, as if he's pouring his entire soul into the music." Of course, I had listened countless times, but that was Xiao Lang. How could I possibly match his brilliance? Xiao Lang was the former lead of the Dream Theater, a prodigy who debuted young, whose global tours were sold out, truly an industry giant and a role model for us all. Sadly, prodigies often live short lives. He suffered severe psychological issues and, not long after leaving the stage, leapt from a hotel rooftop, ending his brief yet dazzling life. He was only 26. The Dream Theater lost its core and was desperate to find new talent. The audition piece was none other than Xiao Lang's iconic Dream Symphony. Without worrying about complaints from my columbarium apartment neighbors, I turned the volume up and listened to Xiao Lang's music on repeat, playing the piece over and over again. I lost track of time. It grew dark without me noticing, and soon the night deepened. In the silent neighborhood, only my light was still on, only from my window came the melody of human life. I was engrossed in my playing when a sudden roar erupted, so annoying. "The fourth measure is wrong, wrong, wrong." Startled, I turned around instinctively. There was no one there. The door was securely shut. But the balcony window was open. Could it be that this columbarium apartment complex actually had visitors? I gathered my courage and walked out to the balcony, only to see darkness all around, with only a few of the streetlights in the complex shining idly. "Who's there?" I called out loudly. A bird fluttered by, breaking the silence, and then it was quiet once more. Was I so absorbed in my playing that I started hallucinating? I shut the balcony window tight and returned to my seat at the piano, scrutinizing the fourth measure on the sheet music. It hadn't been played wrong. Yes, it had to be my imagination. I shook my head, steadied myself, and resumed playing. I had barely played a few measures when another angry shout interrupted. "You can play it 100 times and it will still be wrong. Stop playing it." This time, I heard it clearly. It was a man's voice, close by, as if right next to me. Every door and window was shut, and there was no one in the room. A chill ran down my spine as I tried to keep my voice steady and asked, "Who are you?" The voice sounded exasperated. "Who I am isn't your concern. Listening to you play this awful song every day drives me crazy." I couldn't take that lying down. While I might not be famous, I had graduated from a prestigious music school and even won an outstanding graduate award. Who dared to say I played poorly? "Don't talk nonsense if you don't understand," I shot back at the empty room. "The fourth measure wasn't wrong. Do you even know music?" Silence fell over the air. Humph, pretending to know when they didn't. I let out a small scoff and turned around, planning to continue playing. Just as my foot touched the pedal, the voice spoke again. "If you didn't play it wrong, then the sheet music is wrong." My heart skipped a beat. At my level, reading sheet music was a fundamental skill, so there was no way I played it wrong. But admittedly, there were several parts where no matter how I played, I just couldn't capture Xiao Lang's distinct touch. Including the fourth measure. This is sheet music from the Dream Theater. Before I could finish, there was a ding, and the piano keys moved by themselves. I hadn't touched the keys, both my hands were still in midair. A few probing notes sounded. I watched, wide-eyed, as the keys moved on their own, as if an invisible pair of hands was testing the waters. These hands quickly gained confidence, and a beautiful melody filled the night air. It was the Dream Symphony. I couldn't see him, but my ears could. At that moment, the piano seemed charged with an immense energy, ready to unleash its brilliance through these unseen hands. It was the best live performance I had ever heard, so stirring that I was speechless. When the piece ended, the echo lingered. After a long pause, a soft sigh drifted through the air. It was distant and full of regret. I finally found my voice and asked, "Was that you playing?" My voice was soft and gentle, afraid that a firmer tone might disrupt this mysterious visitor and shatter this perfect moment. To my surprise, the sighing presence suddenly erupted in irritation. Who else would it be? A ghost? The air turned still as the words settled. A moment later, he suddenly deflated. All right, I am indeed a ghost. A ghost that can play the piano? I reached out into the air, but clearly, I couldn't touch him. Scared now. No, not at all. Humph, you're lying to a ghost. He really didn't see himself as a ghost. No one wasn't afraid of ghosts. In the past, I definitely would have been scared, but now, my mind and heart were filled with his performance of the Dream Symphony, stirring waves that hadn't settled, tugging at my emotions. I didn't have the time to be scared. You played so well. I praised him. Master, how about teaching me a bit? I was sincere. His performance had created a beautiful dreamscape, captivating the listener and making them unwilling to wake. Even as a ghost, he possessed an uncommon, intense vitality. Why do you practice this piece every day? He asked. I want to audition for the Dream Theater. It's the exam piece. Humph, he let out a faint snort, his tone full of disdain. I'll play it again. If you still can't hear where you went wrong, I suggest you don't audition at all. Just go back to wherever you came from. With that, the sound of the piano began once more. I didn't have time to dwell on his rudeness. I immediately held my breath and focused, trying to discern each note. I finally understood. The sheet music was indeed wrong. His interpretation was subtly different from the score, as if it were born naturally, reaching an exceptional artistic level. I had only ever felt this kind of brilliance from Xiao Lang. When the piece ended, I couldn't help but clap, but he cut me off, saying coldly, "Our hands are for playing the piano, not for applauding others." Such a bad temper. Definitely a grumpy ghost. You, play at once. His tone was commanding. I took a deep breath and imagined how he played. He had such an infectious presence, effortlessly moving me. A new version of the Dream Symphony flowed from my fingertips. I had never played so well before. My fingertips tingled as if electrified, and my heart was beating wildly. This dream shattered the night sky and enveloped me entirely. As the final note faded, the room fell silent. There was no applause. Even if he did clap, I wouldn't be able to hear it. No, he wouldn't clap, because he had said, his hands were for playing the piano, not for applauding others. I gathered my courage and asked, "Are you Xiao Lang?" Still, there was silence. Hey, Master, did you leave? It seemed like he really had left. There was no response at all. I lightly brushed my fingertips, feeling as if I had just woken from a dream. The next day in class, the teacher was pleasantly surprised and said I had suddenly had a breakthrough. If I could continue to improve, my chances of getting into the Dream Theater would greatly increase. I had spent most of the previous night thinking and was almost certain that the grumpy ghost was Xiao Lang. There were many videos of Xiao Lang's performances online, and his playing style was exactly the same as the grumpy ghost's. However, offstage, Xiao Lang was exceptionally mysterious, rarely appearing in public. On the rare occasions when he did speak, it was in a soft and light voice, making it difficult to distinguish his tone. But music doesn't lie, and the sound of the piano couldn't deceive anyone. Moreover, it was true that Xiao Lang was no longer alive, so it was entirely possible he had become my neighbor in the columbarium apartment. When I returned home, the security guard was dozing off. I woke him up and asked for the surname of the resident in 502. Yawning, he flipped through the register. Xiao. I jumped up in excitement. Ah. It really is Xiao. The guard gave me a suspicious look and muttered, "What's wrong with you?" So what if I was acting crazy? I, the utterly ordinary Fu Wenxia, had actually received personal guidance from the piano genius Xiao Lang. And it happened 6 months after his death. What an incredible twist of fate. In this 2-apartment per floor building, I lived in 501, and Xiao Lang had lived in 502. Such incredible luck was beyond my wildest dreams. When I got home, I deliberately walked to the door of 502 and knocked lightly. Xiao Lang, thank you. There was no response. Suddenly, I remembered, it was broad daylight, it probably wasn't his time to appear yet. So, I dug a sticky note out of my bag and wrote thank you on it. After a moment's thought, I boldly added, can we meet again tonight? Then I slipped the note under the door. That night, I played the piano with extra enthusiasm. Just the thought of Xiao Lang listening nearby filled me with energy. After each piece, I would call out to him, hey, are you here yet? Did I make any progress? Xiao Lang, I know it's you. Quickly show yourself, grumpy ghost. Are you there or not? I listened closely to the silence in the air, wishing I had eyes that could see beyond the living and the dead. Oh well, if he wasn't coming, then he wasn't coming. After all, it was Xiao Lang. Geniuses always have their pride. With a reluctant heart, I fell into a deep sleep, and he did not appear in my dreams either. The next morning, I was awakened by the sound of birds chirping outside the window. Sunlight slanted in through the balcony, casting a soft glow into the room. The warmth spread throughout the space, dispelling any trace of the desolation of the columbarium apartment. I stayed under the covers, slipping into my cartoon pajamas before getting up. My eyes fell on a sticky note placed on the piano cover. It was the same note I had slipped under the door of 502 yesterday. Thank you. Can we meet again tonight? I read the words on the note aloud and let out a small, self-mocking laugh. It seemed that after I had fallen asleep, he had indeed come by. But he had returned the note to me. Was this a rejection? A wave of disappointment washed over me, and I tossed the note into the trash. Fine, if you don't want to meet, so be it. What's the big deal? Go ahead and die of loneliness here. Suddenly, a glimmer caught my eye. There were words on the back. I quickly rummaged through the trash and flipped the note over. 3 words were written there. You have improved. It was his handwriting. So, he had indeed heard me last night, but why hadn't he shown himself? Did he not want to talk to me? Alright, I won't call you Grumpy Ghost anymore, I said to the empty room. I'll call you Teacher Xiao. Whether he was present or not, I pretended he could hear me. Even though Teacher Xiao didn't appear for 3 consecutive days, he hadn't stopped giving me guidance. Every day, I left a sticky note under the door of 502, and without fail, by the next morning, it would be on the piano. There were always a few sparse words of advice on the back. So concise, yet so valuable. Xiao Lang, oh Xiao Lang, were you so bored being a ghost that you wanted to take on a student from the world of the living for fun? Because of this, I worked extra hard. I couldn't let his kindness go to waste. That night, I played the best rendition of Dream Symphony I had ever performed. Looking at the gently swaying curtains, I felt as though he was there. Teacher Xiao, my teacher said I'm 70% like you now. Teacher Xiao, I know you're here. Why won't you talk to me? Should I burn some joss paper for you? No, joss paper is too tacky. How about I make a paper piano for you? Get lost. A sudden roar burst out. He finally showed himself, not earlier, not later, but at the exact moment when I was talking about making him a paper piano, he appeared. And he was as grumpy as ever. Teacher Xiao, who said I'm your Teacher Xiao? He interrupted, his tone carrying the eerie, lingering resentment unique to a ghost. My mind blanked for a moment, assuming he didn't want to take me as a student. Unsure, I asked, then, isn't it disrespectful to call you by name? You think calling me Grumpy Ghost is respectful? Ugh. So he had heard everything. I awkwardly explained, you never showed up, and I was anxious. It was just a way to call you out. And just because you call, I'm supposed to come. I really hated rhetorical questions. They were so intimidating, but remembering that this was Xiao Lang, a revered figure in the piano world, I couldn't help but back down. I wanted to thank you in person, but since you wouldn't show up, I could only burn some, or maybe make some paper goods. A mind distracted will never amount to anything, he said, full of disdain. He continued, don't worry about who I am, and there's no need for thanks. Practice hard, achieve your dreams, and let the whole world hear your music and touch your soul. Only then, you'll be a true musician. Although his tone was cold, compared to his previous grumpiness, I could actually sense a hint of sincere advice. Beneath his harsh exterior was genuine care for me. So, he wasn't just a legend in the piano world, he was a god who, despite his harsh exterior, was willing to guide me. Feeling happy, I responded, got it, thank you, to the greatest. I had finally found the right words. This time, he didn't respond with a question. Instead, he let out a soft scoff and, with a hint of disdain, said, what's this 70% like Xiao Lang? Your teacher's thinking is too limited. But I'm going to audition for Dream Theater. Everyone is hoping for the next Xiao Lang. Humph, he sneered. Why be the next Xiao Lang? Be yourself, play music that belongs to you. Try strengthening the left hand here, he instructed. The sheet music flipped, stopping on a particular page. The piano keys resounded as he began to play a demonstration. I quickly took out my phone and discreetly pressed the record button. That night, he taught me with complete dedication, and I, like an eager sponge, wished to absorb every ounce of his lost talent. I'm leaving, he said. It was the first time he had formally bid me farewell. Goodbye, the greatest, teacher? I waved toward the air, convinced he was still there. Just when I thought there would be no response, his voice echoed from afar. Call me Grumpy Ghost, I approve. The echo faded beyond the door. He was heading to 502. I couldn't bring myself to close the door, even after the sensor light in the hallway turned off and the world quieted to the point where I could only hear my own breathing. I still didn't want to close the door. I declared that grumpy ghosts were the cutest type of ghost. Before falling asleep, I put on my headphones and replayed the recording on my phone. It was a unique recording, the only one in the world, a performance from a life that had long ended, so brilliant, so precious, and mine alone. Yet, I realized his playing was different from the Xiao Lang I knew. In life, Xiao Lang's dream symphony was dazzling and passionate. Now, Xiao Lang's dream was still splendid, but it was filled with anger, imbued with an inexplicable force, a yearning to break through barriers and grasp the light. Perhaps the half-year as a ghost had changed his state of mind. That's what I thought. Ever since I started calling him Grumpy Ghost, our relationship seemed to grow closer in an invisible way. He asked me to buy a string of wind chimes. Every time he came or went, the chimes would ring. He told me not to hide under the covers when changing clothes anymore. My face turned red with embarrassment. I hadn't expected him to know that little secret. The world of the living was laid out plainly, but the world of ghosts filled me with curiosity. I asked him if all the ashes here had turned into ghosts, and if they were all as free to come and go as he was. I also wondered if the other ghosts had any opinions about me playing the piano every day. He said, ashes are ashes, ghosts are ghosts. He mentioned that he was the only ghost who could come and go from my room, but wouldn't explain why. He told me not to ask too much about ghostly matters, and to focus on my piano practice. He didn't like talking about himself, but when it came to my audition for the Dream Theater, he was especially invested. At first, he only offered some minor pointers, but later, he got so involved that he started planning and designing for me, and eventually, he simply went ahead and changed my chosen piece. He said, "What was your teacher thinking? This piece doesn't highlight your strengths at all." Then he picked an extremely difficult piece for me and demonstrated it himself. His performance was top-notch, to the point that I once sighed, "This second-hand piano is unworthy of you. I can't even imagine how amazing you'd sound on a Steinway." He responded with his usual cold laugh and the familiar rhetorical question, "Do you think the piano matters more than the person?" They complement each other? I managed to squeeze out that phrase. He was silent for a moment and then said, "My first piano came from a junkyard." A junkyard? This time, it was my turn to be surprised, looking towards the direction of his voice in astonishment. The Xiao Lang I knew came from a prestigious family of musicians, a true prodigy. How could he have gotten a piano from a junkyard? But before I could ask more, he was back to his usual grumpy self. "That's none of your business. Right now, the most important thing is to play your best on this piano." Back to practice. Under his guidance, I made rapid progress. Even my teacher was stunned and kept praising me for suddenly having an epiphany. When I told him I was changing my chosen piece, he was speechless for a moment and reminded me that it was risky to change pieces so close to the exam. But after listening to my performance, he only said 4 words, "Do as you wish." Finally, the exam was tomorrow. Grumpy Ghost accompanied me through my final practice. Before he left, he tossed an osmanthus branch onto the piano lid, scattering a few petals. "For me? I just picked it on the way. There's plenty around the neighborhood. Even if there's a lot, you still singled out this one branch. Clearly, you're wishing me success." He didn't take the bait. "Can you focus on the exam? Did you prepare your ID and exam admission ticket? Aren't you supposed to sleep early the night before an exam?" Another string of rhetorical questions. Behind his pressing tone was a deep sense of care. The last time someone nagged me this much was my dad. Suddenly, my nose stung. My dad was working hard back home to support my piano lessons. He didn't even know I was auditioning for the Dream Theater. I was afraid he'd be disappointed, so I planned to tell him only after I passed. A tear slipped down my face before I could stop it. Just as I was about to wipe it away, I felt a cool touch on my cheek, like a cold hand brushing away my tears. It was the first time I had ever felt him. I quickly placed my hand over my cheek, but only touched my own skin. The chill had vanished. Grumpy ghost, will I ever be able to see you? I whispered. The wind chime unexpectedly rang. He was leaving without a word again. Grumpy ghost. I rushed to the door, only to find a young woman in the hallway looking at me with surprise. She was elegant and stylish, with French wavy hair and sharp high heels. I quickly retreated back into the room but peeked through the peephole out of curiosity. I watched as the woman walked gracefully to the door of 502, took out a key, and opened it. Was she someone from the Shao family? The wind chime still made a faint sound as the door to 502 closed, and the lights in the hallway quietly went out. The exam venue was the Grand Theater of the Dream Theater. Over 20 finalists who had passed through rounds of selection sat backstage, filled with anxiety. Everyone wore elegant formal attire, looking glamorous. Only I wore a white shirt and a dark blue long skirt, simple and plain, like a student. I couldn't afford a formal dress, but when I touched the osmanthus flower in my bag, I thought, I might not have a dress, but you all don't have Xiaolang's blessing. That straightened my back and brought me confidence. Finally, it was my turn. I pushed open the door leading to the stage, and a blinding light shone through, intense and overwhelming. At the center of the light stood a Steinway grand piano. Xiaolang had once played it. A staff member at the entrance indicated they needed to check my ID and exam admission ticket. I nodded and reached into my bag, but my hand came up empty. I was sure I had put it in this pocket. The grumpy ghost had reminded me to bring my documents, and I had even checked them again in the morning. Cold sweat started to trickle down as I emptied my bag, scattering its contents. The osmanthus flower fell to the floor too, but there was no sign of my documents. My documents were lost. No documents, no exam, the staff member said in an official, detached manner. I passed the first 2 rounds already. The judges must recognize me. The staff member shook his head. Sorry, it's the rule, I pleaded. Can't I play first and then submit my documents later? I promise I'll provide them. Sorry, he called out backstage. Next, a graceful girl in a golden gown walked over, handed in her documents elegantly, and proceeded towards the light. Sitting at the Steinway, the heavy doors closed quietly, cutting off the light without mercy, and I was left outside. I was not convinced. That girl did not play better than me. I could play a better version of Dream Symphony. This feeling of unconvinced made my pain even more unbearable, and tears streamed down uncontrollably. The staff handed me a tissue, but I couldn't even manage a thank you. I covered my face and fled. I ran to a dimly lit corner and leaned on an old, battered piano, sobbing loudly. My childhood dream, years of hard work, my parents' struggles back home, my teacher's dedication, and the meticulous guidance of the grumpy ghost, all wasted due to one simple mistake. In a daze, I heard the final notes from the stage. The exam was over. That graceful girl was the last candidate. The judges were about to leave, and the most important day of my life was about to fade into endless darkness. Suddenly, I remembered the piano I was leaning on. This was the backstage. If I could hear the sounds from the stage, it meant that any sound made here could also be heard on the stage. I still had a chance. I quickly lifted the piano lid. Dust rose and made me sneeze several times, stinging my eyes and causing even more tears. I set my phone upright on the piano and turned on the flashlight, revealing that it was also a Steinway. Tentatively, I played a few notes. It worked, though badly out of tune. The sound quality was exceptional. I took a deep breath. Even if I couldn't get into the Dream Theater, I wanted the judges to hear my performance. In the darkness, I didn't need sheet music. It was just me and the music. On this dust-laden piano, I played the most passionate rendition of Dream Symphony I had ever performed. I no longer cared about the exam. I only wanted my music, my voice, my cries, to break free from this confined, shadowy space and be heard by the world. I didn't know when the door behind me opened. I didn't know when a crowd had gathered outside. All I knew was that when the piece ended, my face was covered with tears. I collapsed heavily onto the piano, producing a chaotic sound, and then broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. The dark room suddenly lit up. A warm, sunlight-like glow shone from above, enveloping both the piano and me. A burst of applause interrupted my sobs. I turned around and saw the judges standing at the doorway. They were applauding. The grumpy ghost once said that the hands of a musician were meant for playing, not applauding, but at this moment, so many musicians were applauding for me. Leading the group was an elderly man with snow-white hair named Xiao Rusong, a giant in the world of music, the founder of the Dream Theater, and Xiao Lang's grandfather. "Continue with your chosen piece," said Xiao Rusong. "So, was I being allowed to continue the exam?" I asked. "Should I go to the stage?" "No, right here, use this piano." I nodded firmly and began to play the chosen piece that the grumpy ghost had selected for me. At that moment, I felt as if the exam was no longer just for myself. Even though he wasn't here, he was everywhere. Every emotion I played was so detailed and vivid. It was the tug-of-war, the intimacy, the love and hate between me and the piano. It was the grumpy ghost who taught me to understand these emotions. The piece ended, but there was no applause. I struggled to pull myself out of my emotions and turned to look at the doorway. Xiao Rusong's eyes were bright and intense, as if possessing the power to freeze time itself. He did not clap, and no one else dared to either. Did this mean I still had a chance? "You've been accepted," said Xiao Rusong. Suddenly, thunderous applause erupted. "Ah!" I screamed in excitement. "Really?" Even though I lost my documents, perhaps my words were a bit too honest, as a few judges were amused and laughed. "Director Xiao already said you've been accepted, so just hurry and replace your documents later." All right. I twirled around a few times in excitement, finally remembering to gently close the piano lid. "I can start work anytime." A soft chuckle came from among the judges, not entirely friendly, as if mocking my childishness. I followed the sound and saw it was the woman who had visited 502 last night. The familiar French wavy hair, sharp high heels, and haughty expression. I was in a great mood, so I didn't mind and nodded at her with a smile. She raised her eyebrows. She must have recognized me, but she seemed a bit disdainful. After filling out a pile of forms, the theater told me to start rehearsals with the troupe tomorrow. It was everything I could have wished for. I was dying to tell the grumpy ghost the good news. As I stepped out of the theater, the scent of osmanthus drifted from a tree by the roadside. I raised the branch of osmanthus the grumpy ghost had given me. Though some petals had fallen, it smelled sweeter than the entire tree. "Fu and Xia," Xiao Rusong called out to me. It seemed he had been waiting specifically for me. "Director Xiao." I approached him. "Thank you for your leniency today. I almost missed the exam." Xiao Rusong nodded. "It was you who created the opportunity for yourself. Luckily, there was a piano backstage. Although it was old, it still played well." But then Xiao Rusong shifted the topic. "In the initial and second tests, you didn't stand out. Yet, a month later, it's as if you've become a completely different person." Impressive. He had seen right through me. I blushed slightly. I couldn't tell the truth, so I said, "Maybe. Maybe I practiced hard." Xiao Rusong clearly didn't believe me and instead asked, "Who is your teacher?" "Rengang." "I know Rengang. This isn't his style." Something stirred in my heart, and I asked, "Then who does Director Xiao think I resemble?" Xiao Rusong gazed at me for a long time and finally said, "An old acquaintance of mine." I knew why I was admitted, because of the grumpy ghost, and the grumpy ghost was Xiao Lang. And I, Xiao Lang's prized pupil in the living world, reminded Xiao Rusong of his grandson. Of course, I hadn't revealed this, worried it might scare that elderly man. Unexpectedly, it wasn't Xiao Rusong who was scared by me, it was the security guard. The moment I appeared at the entrance of the residential complex, the security guard looked at me in astonishment, his mouth agape. You weren't home." "I left early in the morning." Then, the security guard pointed toward my house, his voice trembling. Who's playing the piano?" From my window came the sound of piano music, precisely the Peace Dream Symphony. Who else could it be but the grumpy ghost? Seeing the guard's face turn pale, I didn't dare to scare him further. If he bolted, I'd be the only living soul left in this neighborhood. I quickly made something up. It's a recording of my practice. The computer must have started playing it automatically. The security guard couldn't tell the difference, and he believed me. A hint of color returned to his face as he let out a sigh of relief. "You scared me half to death. I thought the place was haunted." It really was haunted, but I couldn't let him know that. I ran home excitedly, pushed the door open, and shouted, "Grumpy ghost." I got in. The piano music stopped abruptly, and I immediately saw my exam admission ticket and ID on the table. Huh? Why are these here? I remember putting them in my bag. I picked them up, not bothering to dwell on it, and said excitedly, "I got into the Dream Theater." "Really?" "Congratulations," said the grumpy ghost, but his tone didn't sound all that enthusiastic. "Aren't you happy for me?" "I couldn't have done it without your guidance." "Of course I'm happy." To be honest, he didn't sound very happy. But he was the grumpy ghost after all. I was used to his mercurial moods. I really appreciate you. I don't even know what I could do for you." He interrupted me. "If I weren't a ghost, if I were alive, what would you do for me?" The question was odd, but I still smiled and said, "Whatever you asked me to do, I'd do it." "Really, really?" I nodded earnestly, even extending my pinky finger. "We can make a pinky promise." "Childish," he scoffed lightly. I laughed, pulling my hand back, and took out the branch of osmanthus from my bag. "Thanks to your lucky charm, I have to put it up as an offering." I found an empty water bottle, put the osmanthus in it, and placed it on the piano, filling the room with a faint fragrance. "How did you get in without your ID?" he asked. It was so nerve-wracking. They wouldn't let me into the exam room at all. Luckily, there was an old piano backstage. I didn't care. I played on that old piano instead. I just thought, even if I don't pass, they need to hear my music. The grumpy ghost's breathing suddenly grew heavy. "That piano, is it okay?" His voice trembled slightly. It was the first time he'd ever reacted like this. It was a bit out of tune, but everything else was fine. "You once said that true masters aren't limited by their tools," he muttered quietly. "My words matter that much? Of course, you're Xiao Lang, your words are." "Stop," he shouted sharply. I jumped, startled, unsure which nerve of his I had hit again. Just as I was about to ask, I heard the sound of wind chimes. He had already left. I chased after him. "Grumpy ghost, why did you leave? Did I say something wrong that made you mad?" He didn't respond. He was always like this. Every time he got angry, he would silently retreat to his columbarium apartment. He might even shrink back into his urn. Sigh. Forget it, he was a ghost after all. I should let him be. I wrote a note and slipped it under the door. "Hiding won't work. I'll come and pester you every day." At night, when I thought back, I felt that the grumpy ghost's reaction was really strange. He clearly cared so much about this exam, but when I actually passed, he didn't seem happy at all. And why was he playing the piano at my house in broad daylight? I suddenly remembered that the house had surveillance. I had heard before that this place was a columbarium apartment, so out of a sense of reverence, I installed cameras. I pulled up the footage and skipped straight to the time just before I left in the morning. To my surprise, as I was bending down to change my shoes, my exam admission ticket and ID card slipped out of my bag. No, they were stealthily taken out by someone. It was the grumpy ghost. Why did he take my documents? No wonder he wasn't excited. Deep down, he didn't want me to pass the exam at all. Even if he didn't want me to pass, did he really have to resort to such underhanded tactics? Thinking about my desperation in the exam room, I couldn't wait any longer and needed to confront him immediately. I rushed out and pounded on the door of 502 with loud thuds. "Grumpy ghost, come out. Don't pretend you're not there. I know you're home." At this moment, I finally understood Aunt Shue's frustration. Dealing with someone stubborn who refused to explain anything no matter what. It made you want to smash everything and end it once and for all. I grabbed a brick, ready to smash the door, when suddenly a cold gust of wind swept past. "Even ghosts need sleep. What are you doing?" The grumpy ghost spoke, his tone impatient. "Did you steal my documents?" "Silence, say something. You put so much effort into teaching me. Wasn't it because you wanted me to pass? Why did you steal my documents?" Still silence. "Grumpy ghost. Aren't you known for being grumpy? Hurry up and get angry." I was so infuriated that I was about to break down. "Don't go," he suddenly said. "Let's try for another theater." This request was too strange. The Dream Theater is the best, and I already got in. Why would I apply for another one? Just listen to me. No, the Dream Theater had been my dream for years, and Xiao Lang was my idol. I was about to step into the place where dreams came true, where I could sit at the piano that Xiao Lang once played. That light would soon exist for me, and now he was telling me not to go. He must have gone mad. Angry, I turned around and stormed back into 501, slamming the door hard behind me. I expected him to follow me inside. After all, that door couldn't keep him out, but he didn't come in. Instead, he spoke from outside. "Weren't my words important to you?" I couldn't believe it. Not only was this person moody, but he was inconsistent. Before, when I said his words mattered, he gave me the cold shoulder. Now he suddenly wanted to matter again? Dream on. They're not important anymore, I shouted, and stop using rhetorical questions with me. It's really annoying. It was silent outside. I couldn't understand why the grumpy ghost acted this way. Could it be that he was being stubborn because he realized that someone else was finally going to replace him? Regardless, I was determined to go to the Dream Theater. I had to perform my own dream symphony under the spotlight, with all eyes on me. I wanted the name Fu Wenxia to be etched into the minds of every young piano student. Just like Xiao Lang in the past, after my argument with the grumpy ghost, he never showed up again. I began formally rehearsing with the troupe, under the direct guidance of Xiao Rusong. The theater offered me a dormitory, but I politely declined. My outward reason was that I was used to living alone, but in truth, I still hoped that the grumpy ghost would come looking for me. If I moved, our connection would be completely severed, then it would truly be a separation between life and death. I didn't want that. Every day, when I passed by 502, I felt an urge to knock on the door. Twice, I even raised my hand, ready to knock, but the thought of how that guy had toyed with me made my anger flare up, and I turned away. The osmanthus flowers in the mineral water bottle had already withered, but I couldn't bring myself to throw them away. I let them dry up into preserved flowers. Though the disappearance of the grumpy ghost weighed heavily on me, I never slacked in my practice. I finally had the chance to play the Steinway on the main stage, but it earned me nothing but cold stares and snide comments from my colleagues. The lead pianist, Xiao Han, who was also the one with French wavy hair, taunted me, saying, "You think you deserve to play this piano? I don't know what my grandfather was thinking when he recruited you. Was it because you were cheap?" The other colleagues snickered. Xiao Han was Xiao Lang's cousin. After Xiao Lang died, she took over as the lead pianist of the Dream Theater. The theater had put effort into promoting her as Xiao Lang's cousin and another rising star of the Xiao family, but the public's response was that her skills were mediocre, unlikely to reach greatness. So I understood why she was anxious. She was afraid I would replace her. I fought back. "I got in here on my own merit, and I have every right to play the same piano as you." She laughed softly and walked away, leaving behind a comment that I couldn't quite understand. "Is that so? You're just a thing that can't stand in the spotlight." Time flew by, and soon it was time for the Golden Autumn Concert, an important annual performance for the Dream Theater. I went to Xiao Rusong to volunteer, and he nodded with a smile. "You've been practicing for so long. It's only natural to showcase your skills." Then he added, "But you're still too inexperienced. Without any fame, you can't draw an audience. For now, you'll be Xiao Han's substitute." I understood that I was neither a soaring star like Xiao Lang nor a socialite with a powerful family background like Xiao Han. Securing even a substitute spot was enough to make me content, so I accepted it gladly. I thought being a substitute meant stepping in if Xiao Han grew exhausted from consecutive performances or had a sudden illness. But I never expected that when the Golden Autumn Concert poster was released, my name was nowhere to be found. I was stunned. I went to ask Xiao Rusong, "Director Xiao, wasn't I supposed to be the substitute?" Xiao Rusong led me to that dim corner backstage and switched on the overhead light. The intense beam instantly enveloped me and that old piano. He smiled and said, "Your place is here." I was not a substitute. I was a stand-in behind the scenes. The final piece of the Golden Autumn Concert, Dream Symphony, was performed by Xiao Han on the surface, but in reality, what the audience heard was my performance from backstage. That was why Xiao Han said I was a thing that can't stand in the spotlight. I couldn't accept it. This was an insult to me and a desecration of music. At first, Xiao Rusong seemed kind and approachable, saying that Dream Symphony had a special significance, that Xiao Han couldn't capture its essence, and that the Dream Theater needed a superstar to restore its former glory. And me? Though I could play Dream Symphony perfectly, I lacked the buff of being a superstar. When I refused to comply, Xiao Rusong dropped his facade. He told me that while I had the right not to accept, no theater would ever hire a pianist expelled by the Dream Theater. From that day on, my path in the music world was sealed shut. He said it with a smile, but in that smile, I saw ferocity. I didn't even remember how I got home. I was dazed, wandering as if lost in a fog. It wasn't until I stepped out of the elevator, into the solitude of my own world, that my legs gave way. Overcome with grief, I sat in the hallway and wept uncontrollably. My dream had become a joke. I was stripped of my name, stripped of my identity, and even stripped of the sunlight. From now on, I would be a mole in the darkness, surviving humbly in a world devoid of light. Tears blurred my vision, distorting the number 502 before me. 502, a sudden shiver ran down my spine. Could it be that the grumpy ghost knew all along? He had always guided me with wholehearted dedication, clearly wanting me to succeed, but on the morning after Xiao Han's visit, he changed his mind and tried to stop me from taking the exam. He must have known the truth. He didn't want to see me become a mole, and I had completely misunderstood him. "Grumpy ghost, come out. You knew all along that I would be a stand-in, didn't you? I was wrong to blame you, Grumpy ghost. I apologize. Quickly come out. I knocked on the door, but there was no response. I needed to see him, immediately. If he wouldn't come out, then at least I could pay my respects at his memorial. That would be my gratitude and my remorse. Without a key, I used my body to ram against the door, a loud thud, but the door didn't budge. Pain shot through me, and I let out a groan. Then, a key slid out from under the door and bumped into my foot. The grumpy ghost finally wanted to see me. The key turned with a soft click, and the door opened. Every window was tightly covered, plunging the room into darkness. A beam of light poured in from the open door. In the center stood a memorial altar, but the name on it was unfamiliar, Lin Yu Bai. The photograph showed an unfamiliar face as well, young, defiant, stern, grumpy ghost? I whispered, bewildered. I hadn't expected everything behind the door to be so unfamiliar. A soft sigh came from the corner. It was so familiar, and I suddenly felt at ease. Is that you, grumpy ghost? I asked quietly. The familiar voice grew deeper. I'm not Xiao Lang. Are you disappointed? I did not feel disappointed. Instead, I even felt a sense of relief. I would always harbor resentment toward the Xiao family, and I did not want the grumpy ghost to have any connection with them. I shook my head firmly. Not disappointed, really? He looked skeptical, then immediately reflected on himself. Sorry, I know you don't like rhetorical questions, but I want to be sure. You're really not disappointed. Who would still care about his rhetorical questions at this point? I took a deep breath. A bit surprised, but not disappointed at all. In fact, I was glad you're not Xiao Lang, because I would never forgive the Xiao family. Alright, that's good, the grumpy ghost said in a low voice. Your name is Lin Yu Bai. Yes, you play so well, yet I've never heard your name, because, like you, I could only hide in the shadows, using my music to decorate others' lives, never deserving a name of my own. I was stunned. So you are. I am Xiao Lang's stand-in. In that instant, all the mysteries surrounding Xiao Lang's brief life were resolved. He had risen to fame at a young age, but after the age of 22, he announced he would no longer go on tours and would only perform at the Dream Theater. Everyone said he no longer needed to chase fame around the world, even if he only appeared on the stage of the Dream Theater. Music lovers from around the globe would come to worship him. After he became a permanent performer at the Dream Theater, his skills indeed grew more refined, but it turned out it was not that he had improved, it was that from that point on, it was no longer Xiao Lang playing the piano, but the grumpy ghost. No, the grumpy ghost had a name. He was Lin Yu Bai. Lin Yu Bai was the true performer, the one who moved countless audiences, the one who gave every person who walked into the theater a golden dream. Even the recordings of Xiao Lang's later albums were performed by him. How naive I had been. I had already noticed the significant shift between Xiao Lang's early and later music, but I had assumed it was simply an evolution. But it wasn't my fault, was it? Everyone else had been kept in the dark, too. Was it that old scoundrel Xiao Rusong who forced you? I was indignant, even more outraged than when I had to be a stand-in myself. Lin Yubai spoke slowly. There is a long story between Xiao Lang and me. Hearing this, I turned and gently closed the door. The room fell back into darkness, like the backdrop of this story from the past. It turned out that Lin Yubai was an adopted son of the Xiao family. In his early years, his family was poor. He once found a toy piano in a pile of trash and, treating it as a treasure, took it home and managed to play Jingle Bells on it. His extraordinary talent was evident. His parents spared no effort to support his piano studies, and even his teacher was willing to teach him for free. When he was 12, he participated in a competition alongside Xiao Lang. He came in first, while Xiao Lang came in second. It was the only competition in Xiao Lang's short life where he did not take first place. Not long after, a car accident shattered the Lin family. Lin's father passed away, and Lin's mother fell into a coma. At a young age, Lin Yubai had to bear the burden of his family and was on the verge of giving up on his musical path. At that moment, Xiao Rusong extended a helping hand, arranging for Lin's mother to be admitted to the best nursing home and bringing Lin Yubai into the Xiao family to be carefully taught and live with them. Lin Yubai was 3 years younger than Xiao Lang. Although their personalities were vastly different, they shared a deep mutual understanding, competing with and surpassing each other, and held a strong sense of admiration for one another. But over time, Lin Yubai discovered that the Xiao family harbored a secret. The first time he noticed something unusual was when Xiao Lang knocked over his cup while drinking water. He saw with his own eyes that Xiao Lang's hand was trembling, yet Xiao Lang himself was completely unaware of it. Later, he accidentally overheard a conversation between Xiao Rusong and a doctor in the study, and only then did he learn that Xiao Lang had a genetic disease. As he aged, the tremors would become more frequent, and his muscles would lose strength. This meant that Xiao Lang might not be able to continue playing the piano after the age of 20. By the time Xiao Lang was 22, he could no longer sustain long practice sessions and even made a rare mistake during a concert tour. It became a scandal that stirred up a lot of talk. Lin Yubai thought the Xiao family would announce Xiao Lang's illness, but Xiao Rusong told him that there was a piano in the backstage of the Dream Theater, prepared specifically for him. From then on, Lin Yubai was to be Xiao Lang's stand-in. He even added that if Lin Yubai refused, he would cut off the funding for Lin's mother's care. Lin Yubai finally understood why Xiao Rusong had spared no effort in teaching him over the years as if he were his own grandson, yet never allowed him to perform or compete publicly. It was because Xiao Rusong had been waiting for this day. From the moment Xiao Rusong first visited the Lin family, he had been plotting this grand deceit, thinking of his mother, lying in the nursing home and receiving the best treatment. Lin Yubai swallowed his humiliation and agreed. Xiao Lang fought against it fiercely, and Lin Yubai had to force a smile as he tried to comfort him, claiming it was his own choice and that the Xiao family's genetic condition had to remain a secret. "Please, let me have the chance to repay the Xiao family," Lin Yubai said. Only heaven knew how much his heart ached. This meant that he, Lin Yubai, would be condemned to a life forever hidden in darkness. From that day onward, Lin Yubai began performing from behind the stage. Each of his performances drained him, making him feel like a mole, a sinner being punished by the heavens, never to see the light. He grew thinner and became unable to sleep through the night. He began to hate going out during the day, and even stitched the curtains in his bedroom tightly shut, for even the accidental touch of morning sunlight filtering in would make him shudder all over. He could only imagine the sunlight during his performance, imagine the starry sky, the ocean, the forest, imagine having both parents, and imagine that there was still someone in this world who loved and cared for him. He played that backstage piano for 4 whole years. Then, one day, he went to the nursing home to visit his mother and found out that she had passed away a month prior. To ensure he remained compliant as a stand-in, the Xiao family had hidden the news of his mother's death, depriving him of the chance to say goodbye. Lin Yubai completely broke down. After a fierce confrontation with the Xiao family, he stormed out in a rage. His long isolation from the world left him unable to navigate the roads, and the glaring sunlight blinded him until he felt dizzy. Like a bird that had lost its wings, he plummeted to the ground, disoriented among the roaring traffic. Amid the screech of brakes, Lin Yubai's life, one that had never truly been his, came to an end. At this point, Lin Yubai cried. This grumpy, temperamental man, who was sometimes a bit shy, was now crying like a helpless child. "Lin Yubai." I opened my arms, making a gesture for an embrace. Then, I felt it, someone really leaning into me, cool to the touch, yet there were warm droplets falling on my shoulder. Ghosts were cold, but a ghost's tears, surprisingly, were warm. I had said before that for the grumpy ghost, I would do anything. Even if it meant being blacklisted in the music industry. Wiping away my tears, I returned to the theater the next day as if nothing had happened and told Xiao Rusong, "I can be a stand-in, but for a higher price." Then I named an astronomical figure. Xiao Rusong was stunned and said I was crazy. I replied, "This amount to buy out my entire life. It's worth it, otherwise, I will go down with you," making a big fuss, and let's see who ends up more embarrassed. Worst case, I'll stop playing piano and go back to my hometown to open a bubble tea shop. Maybe it was my reckless determination that shook Xiao Rusong. After a moment of silence, he actually agreed. To think he would agree to this, the Xiao family must really be wealthy, money that pricks the conscience. The Golden Autumn concert ran for 3 consecutive days, with each performance sold out. In the backstage where Lin Yubai had once hidden for 4 years, I used that perfectly tuned Steinway to win thunderous applause for Xiao Han. At the final performance, Xiao Rusong invited many people from the industry, including the most critical music reviewers. He felt certain I was now under his control, so he acted without restraint. As expected, the critics praised Xiao Han's performance, especially the final piece, Dream Symphony. They said it broke through the limits of Xiao Han's previous performances and had the charm reminiscent of Xiao Lang's style. In the period that followed, Xiao Han was constantly in the limelight, appearing in magazines, variety shows, and even sitting in the front row at a fashion show in Paris. She had become a rising star. Her attitude towards me shifted from disdain to outright hostility. One time, she stared at me for a long while and asked, "Why do you still live there?" "It's cheap," I answered flatly. "My grandfather gave you plenty of money. enough for you to buy a large house in the city. I enjoy the company of ghosts. You're insane. Xiao Han's expression was like she was looking at a mental patient. Just like how the security guard had looked at me the first time, they all didn't understand. I truly enjoyed the company of a ghost named Lin Yubai. Ever since learning about Lin Yubai's past, I decided I didn't mind his grumpiness. But strangely enough, he wasn't as grumpy anymore. According to him, he hadn't known how to interact with people before, but now he felt a bit of longing for the sunlight in his heart. I didn't know if that was a good or bad thing for a ghost. Even though I still couldn't see him, our interactions felt more natural, harmonious even. I bought him a phone. Sometimes I would get a message from him, "What are you doing?" My heart would soften in an instant. In this world, he was the only one who had just me in his contact list. I told him many things about the outside world, letting him live in my space, watch shows with me, listen to gossip, and keep me company while I practiced piano. Even going on nighttime walks with me. The security guard was quite impressed by my courage and said, "Roaming around alone in the middle of the night, aren't you afraid of ghosts?" I laughed. Humans are scarier than ghosts. I also pestered Lin Yubai to tell me things about the ghost world. He was a bit embarrassed and admitted that he hadn't actually interacted with other ghosts. My music had awakened him, allowing him to come and go freely. Before that, he didn't have any consciousness at all. I said, "Then you're not a ghost. You're still halfway to the ghost world. Right now, you're just an invisible man." He thought about it and said that this understanding worked. I also heard bits and pieces about the Xiao family from him over time, including Xiao Han, who had bought him a columbarium apartment. Xiao Han often visited 502, and after regaining his awareness, Lin Yubai understood her curses. From Xiao Han's rants, he learned that Xiao Lang had committed suicide. Xiao Lang had always been frail, and losing control of his body had worsened his depression. The memory of Lin Yubai's death tormented him day and night until one day, he left a suicide note and jumped off the roof. That's why Xiao Han always acted crazed when she came to 502. She cursed at Lin Yubai, "Who gave you permission to die? In life, you were a ghost of the Xiao family. In death, you're still a ghost of the Xiao family." She also blamed him. "This is all you're doing." Xiao Lang could have chosen a graceful exit, announcing his retirement from the stage due to illness. Now the whole world is laughing at the Xiao family. "Are you happy?" Lin Yubai never said a word. He didn't want anyone to know he was still there. Only once did he almost lose control. It was the night before my exam. Xiao Han came to 502 again and started cursing, talking nonsense about how poor people should accept their fate and that he was born to be a stand-in. "You think that just because you're dead, the Xiao family can't find another stand-in? Rest assured, there are plenty of poor people in the world who will line up to take your place. My grandfather found me a stand-in too. She lives right across from you. Fate, huh? One on the left, one on the right, both born to be stand-ins." Lin Yubai was shocked. He suddenly rushed out, a blast of cold wind making Xiao Han scream. The scream snapped Lin Yubai back to his senses. He clenched his fists and restrained himself. I wanted to laugh. That was so typical of Xiao Han. Even when faced with just a photograph, she could be so viciously sharp. Lin Yubai said, "Why did you agree to be her stand-in? She doesn't deserve it. I need the money, then leave when you've earned enough." I shook my head. I want justice even more. I earned money to seek justice for Lin Yubai, and justice for myself. I wanted them both. "Lin Yubai, I want to produce a piano album for you. Production and promotion, all of it will need funding." Lin Yubai was a bit taken aback. I could even sense the chill in the air as he shifted uneasily. "I'll take care of it. You just focus on practicing the piano for now." "Alright." His response was filled with trust. Once, he was the absolute authority on the path of music. Now, in this world, I wanted to become his support. I started working tirelessly, selecting pieces, booking the best recording studio under Lin Yubai's name, and opening accounts on music platforms. On the day of the recording, I claimed that I was accustomed to playing the piano in enclosed spaces and drew the curtains tight. I sat side by side with Lin Yubai, and when he reached the most emotional part of the piece, tears rolled down my face. I knew then that this album was complete. This was an encore gifted to the world by someone who had already passed away. Magnificent. Lin Yubai was not entirely unaware of the ways of the world. He said, "Fu and Xia, I'm already a dead man. Don't sacrifice too much for me. You need to leave yourself an escape route." I responded with unwavering conviction. "If the plan succeeds, I will find a way out, and if it fails?" I smiled confidently. "Then there's always plan B. I won't fail." When post-production was completed, the producer was ecstatic and insisted on recommending it to a record company for publishing, claiming that this album would shake the music industry. I declined politely. I had my own pace. Winter arrived in no time, and the rehearsals at the Dream Theater continued. Xiao Rusong would sometimes look at me, lost in thought. "Director Xiao, am I reminding you of your old acquaintance again?" I deliberately asked. Xiao Rusong withdrew his gaze and said calmly, "If he were still alive, he would probably appreciate you." "I think so too," I smiled. If Xiao Rusong was frighteningly solemn, then Xiao Han was laughably superficial. She joined a romance reality show, trying to craft an image of herself as an ethereal, untouchable figure, but it backfired. Times had changed, and audiences no longer fell for that. Some even hinted that her playing skills on the show were unworthy of the title Piano Queen. Xiao Han desperately needed to restore her reputation, so she came up with an idea: have her romantic interest from the show pretend to sneak into her New Year concert to create a romantic surprise. The showrunners thought this script was perfect. Finally, the opportunity one had been waiting for came. On the eve of the New Year's concert, I uploaded the recorded album to the music platform under the account name Lin Yubai. At this moment, Lin Yubai was submerged in an ocean of obscurity, unnoticed, but he would soon become explosively popular. Very soon, the Dream Theater's New Year concert, combined with the sensational variety show, was absolutely a hot ticket that was nearly impossible to get. I stood backstage, peering into the theater through the one-way glass. The production team had already set up multiple camera angles, and everyone was in position. Influential figures in the music world entered the venue one after another, all with smiles on their faces, taking their seats under the spotlight. Even Xiao Han's romantic interest from the variety show, a young movie star, had gracefully taken his seat. It was perfect, exactly what I had dreamed of. The concert began, and the atmosphere was extremely lively. Xiao Han took the stage as the final performer, playing 2 songs to welcome the new year. The entire theater was energized, diving into the New Year's celebration. Then came the main event. The cameras for the reality show were raised high, ready to capture the grand finale piece, Dream Symphony. Xiao Han had changed into another custom-designed gown and elegantly walked to the piano. It was my cue. Having been her stand-in for 3 months, I had grown adept at this. The moment she lifted her hands, I synchronized perfectly and pressed down the piano keys. The music that echoed throughout the theater was actually mine, but this time, things were going to be a little different. As soon as the first movement ended, just when the piece was transitioning from the flourishing spring to the nostalgic echoes of childhood memories, I twisted my wrist and seamlessly switched to another piece. From my vantage point, I could see the stage. I saw Xiao Han caught off guard, momentarily stunned. Although she quickly adjusted, I knew that the keen-eyed big shots in the front row would sense something was off. Just as Xiao Han managed to catch up to the piece I had shifted to, I switched songs again. Xiao Han scrambled to follow, and murmurs started rippling through the theater. The audience had begun to notice. While the influential figures might be composed, the regular audience members were not as reserved. They whispered among themselves, sensing an impending spectacle, and many raised their phones to capture the moment. I felt an exhilarating satisfaction inside. I knew Xiao Han was probably cursing me endlessly in her heart, and as for Xiao Rusong, he must have been furious, almost to the point of spitting blood. "Xiao Rusong, you better hold it in for now. I want you to spit it out right in front of me." Footsteps echoed from outside. Some staff who knew what was going on rushed over to stop my antics. I stopped playing, grabbed the emergency hammer I had prepared, and ran to the glass. With a forceful swing, I smashed it. With a loud crash, the glass shattered, splintering into countless shards that cascaded down onto the stage. Screams erupted throughout the theater, including from Xiao Han on stage, and I, standing before the now empty frame, finally saw the entire theater in full view. So this was how bright a theater without glass could be, and how scorching the unobstructed stage lights felt. I heard the audience exclaiming in astonishment, "Look, there's someone up there. It's a woman. Who is she?" Everyone turned their attention to me, the uninvited guest who appeared midair on stage. I shouted loudly, "My name is Fu Wenxia. I'm Xiao Han's stand-in, and the Dream Symphony you heard was played by me. The Dream Theater has deceived you all. Get her off the stage, she's crazy." Xiao Rusong waved his arms wildly. Staff rushed toward me, and I shouted, "I'm not crazy." "Xiao Rusong, do you dare let everyone hear my performance live? A rare spectacle like this, how could anyone miss it?" Someone with quick reflexes immediately started a live stream, while others yelled, come down and play for everyone." The chorus of voices grew louder and louder, calling for me to perform. The scene spiraled out of control. In a panic, Xiao Han made a crucial mistake. She screamed, covered her face, and ran off the stage. "Xiao Han's guilty." The audience shouted, "Fu Wenxia, play something! Fu Wenxia, play something!" I didn't know who started it, but soon the entire audience was chanting in unison. The MC stepped onto the stage, attempting to forcibly end the concert, but was stopped by a stern-faced figure in the front row who called out, "Why not just listen to her play and find out who really performed? If she's indeed making trouble, we can call the police." Another prominent figure spoke up. Under the watchful eyes of everyone, I pushed aside the staff blocking my way, held my head high, and walked out of the dim backstage, stepping onto the stage of the Dream Theater. The place I once considered sacred, the stage I had dreamed of since childhood, these few dozen meters felt like a grueling journey, one I had once thought impossible in this lifetime. I sat down at the Steinway piano and looked resolutely at the sound control room. The sound engineers were accomplices. They used technology to support this absurd performance. Now, they had no choice but to channel the live sound to the stage. At this moment, I felt as if Lin Yubai was sitting right beside me. The searing heat overhead, combined with the coolness radiating from my side, made me feel strong and full in the midst of everyone's gaze. The music began, reaching every corner of the theater. I offered everyone a complete rendition of the Dream Symphony, and the audience was ignited by my music, giving me the most enthusiastic applause. The internet had exploded. Xiao Han's account was the first to be overwhelmed. Thousands upon thousands of netizens swarmed in, accusing her of deception and tarnishing the reputation of the Xiao family. The louder her fame as the piano queen had once been, the harder it collapsed now. This was her due retribution, her backlash. Xiao Rusong caught me at the theater entrance. He gritted his teeth, his eyes blazing with fury that could have burned me alive dozens of times over. "Fu Wenxia, your life is over. I will use every ounce of my power to make sure you suffer a fate worse than death." I sneered, "Use all the power you have. If this industry can't tell right from wrong, then I, Fu Wenxia, don't care for it." The winter-blooming osmanthus trees had lost their fragrance, but the evergreen leaves endured. Under the trees was a crowd of onlookers, holding up their phones and still live-streaming. When I stepped outside, a commotion rippled through them as they rushed toward me. "Fu Wenxia, you're amazing. Exposing the powerful families. Xiao family deserves it." They were all trying to get me to speak. Every word I uttered could land on the trending topics list, and even my slightest expressions would be scrutinized, dissected, and turned into the next big conversation. I smiled as I glanced around. Leading at the front was a young girl. Her shoe heel had been trampled loose, yet she pressed forward without hesitation, and she alone asked a question that stood out. She asked, "Fu Wenxia, aren't you afraid of Xiao family's revenge?" I smiled slightly. "How many viewers are in your live stream right now?" 9,000, she replied. "Alright, I'll get you past 10,000. "No, 100,000. I hailed a cab and let the girl get in with me. Her camera could ensure I got home safely and also allowed me to complete the show to the very end. The revenge in the theater had been for me. Next, I needed to seek justice for Lin Yubai. My name is Fu Wenxia. From the day I entered the music academy, I dreamed of one day standing on the stage of the Dream Theater. This fall, I won the final spot in the troupe's audition. I was overjoyed, naively believing that I, Fu Wenxia, would finally become the most dazzling figure under the spotlight. Little did I know, this was only the beginning of a farce. Facing the camera, I slowly recounted my experiences one by one. Outside the camera's view, I also unlocked my phone and joined the girls' livestream. I saw the viewer count in the upper right corner climb to 100,000 and countless comments rushing past. They sympathized with me, cursed the Xiao family's ruthless behavior, and mocked Xiao Han's pretentiousness. Of course, there were also those who criticized me. They were Xiao Lang's fans. I said calmly, all of Xiao Lang's performances after he turned 22 were also done by a stand-in. What? The girl gasped, and even the driver slammed on the brakes. The Xiao family is very experienced at manipulating these things. I wasn't the first. If I didn't step up and expose them today, I wouldn't be the last either. The livestream's comment section was flooding faster than I could read, filled with stunned faces and exclamation marks. Someone spammed, "Xiao Lang only performed at the Dream Theater after turning 22. It matches." The girl, clearly a knowledgeable music enthusiast, asked, "Xiao Lang had won awards in competitions and even did global tours before. It's impossible to fake those. His skill level wouldn't need a stand-in at all." The Xiao family has a genetic condition. By the age of 22, Xiao Lang could hardly complete a full piece anymore. Xiao Rusong found a stand-in for him. His name was Lin Yubai. Lin as in forest, Yu as in island, Bai as in purity. He and I were both children from ordinary families. The spotlight never found us, but Xiao Rusong did. Once the Xiao family sets its sights on you, you're destined to live namelessly for the rest of your life. If we refuse to cooperate, we would struggle to take even a single step forward from then on. The live stream erupted. Damn, that's so vile. Xiao Rusong is supposed to be a big shot, right? This can't be true, but Fu Wenxia taking the stage as a stand-in today is an undeniable fact. The chaos in the livestream was unmatched. The girl read out comments selectively. Xiao Lang's style did change after he turned 22. Yes, we fans all noticed that. Miss Fu, where is Lin Yubai now? Right, Xiao Lang has passed away, so Lin Yubai should be free. How come we've never heard of him? Suddenly, I felt something choke up in my throat, spreading down to my heart. It was an inexplicable pain. Lin Yubai will never appear again. I couldn't bring myself to say the word dead. In my heart, he wasn't gone. He was the grumpy ghost who accompanied me, encouraged me, and helped me survive my darkest days. He was also Lin Yubai, the one who gave me the strength to be bold enough to stand against the entire world. He wasn't dead. He was merely invisible. His voice, his soul, his music, they were still here, in this world. He had never left. The girl seemed to have guessed something and asked softly, "Is he all right?" I swallowed the lump in my throat. He's doing well. He just chose to retreat from the world. I've uploaded his music album. Fans interested can go listen to it. His music deserves to be heard. His name deserves to be remembered by the world. Lin Yubai. Lin as in forest, Yu as in island, Bai as in purity. Lin Yubai was sobbing uncontrollably in 501. I did it. With just those 3 words, I couldn't help but cry as well. Outside, a storm of public outrage was already raging. The girl's livestream had been recorded and shared by countless viewers. Xiao Han was scolded so badly that she had to disable comments on her social media, and Xiao Rusong's escape in a car had been surrounded until it was impenetrable, his flustered and disgraceful image spreading far and wide. They deserved it. Lin Yubai's account was gaining followers at an astonishing rate. His album was being listened to by countless people, and an overwhelming number of comments flooded the review section, full of praise, astonishment, and boundless curiosity. Prominent music critics rushed to be the first to express their admiration, offering the most effusive compliments and unanimously confirming that this was indeed the performance style that Xiao Lang had displayed in his later works. Some fans of Xiao Lang were not convinced. Maybe this is just Xiao Lang's performance. One music critic replied, the last 2 pieces were composed after Xiao Lang's death. That settled it. Lin Yubai shot to the top of the trending charts, the download charts, and the review charts, all at number 1. This was what he deserved. Perhaps it had taken too long, but it had finally come. This world finally knows you, Lin Yubai. You have a name now. Suddenly, I was enveloped in an embrace. Lin Yubai's sobs were so close. Thank you. His tears soaked my forehead, warm and damp. Don't cry. I don't want us to cry. Let's be happy, okay? I tried hard to smile, but instead, I cried even more. Along with him, that night, Lin Yubai did not return to 502. His album played on repeat from the computer, and we reveled in the piano notes, reckless and free, like 2 mad souls wandering beyond this world. We cried until we laughed until we cried, and finally fell into a deep sleep in his embrace. By the time I awoke, it was dawn. Sunlight slanted through the window. I suddenly felt the emptiness of the space where he had been. If it weren't for the dried traces of tears still on my forehead, I might have thought last night was just a dream. Lin Yubai. There was no response, only silence in the room. A sudden sense of foreboding rose in my heart, and I rushed out of my apartment. The door to 502 was locked, no different from usual. But at this moment, all I felt was a cold chill, a sense of finality sweeping over me. Lin Yubai had given me the key long ago. My hands trembled as I unlocked the door to 502. Lin Yubai? Grumpy ghost? The memorial altar looked the same. The young boy in the photo, delicate and faintly smiling, stared at me. You're ignoring me again? Don't go, you can't go. The silence frightened me, and tears streamed down uncontrollably. Grumpy ghost, please don't leave me here alone, okay? The empty room echoed back my calls, hollow and cold. In front of the memorial altar, Lin Yubai's phone was placed neatly. He had really left me alone in this world. There was an unsent message in Lin Yubai's phone. I tried many times, but still couldn't make you see me. and now my time awake grows shorter. No matter how unwilling I am, I know it's time to take my final bow. Thank you for giving me such an extraordinary encore. Spending these days with you made life complete. Please bury my ashes next to my parents. I want to have a good rest. Don't think about me, Fu and Xia. Please take good care of yourself in the days to come. I pressed send, holding the phone and crying uncontrollably. My grumpy ghost, not even a single question mark. He would never respond with a rhetorical question again. I would take care of myself, but forget about him? No chance, because I believed that somewhere, I would meet Lin Yubai again. The Xiao family hadn't managed to drive me away, and I was living more resiliently than ever. A month later, I returned to Dream Theater. The board of directors had already removed Xiao Rusong from his position as the director of the troupe. The music industry wasn't without principles, and now it was the Xiao family that found themselves unable to continue. I heard that Xiao Rusong had a stroke. I didn't get to witness his lopsided face firsthand, which was a slight disappointment. But I did see Xiao Han in her downfall. She went to 502 to find Lin Yubai, only to discover an empty memorial altar, and then came storming into Dream Theater in a frenzy. I looked at her dry, lifeless hair and pale cheeks, marveling at how a person could become an empty shell when their spirit was gone. This shell, wrapped in torn, laddered stockings, was bleak and destitute. You stole Lin Yubai, she screamed. You stole his life. I only helped him reclaim the smallest piece of it. Xiao Han glared at me, eyes fixed. He's dead. How did you record the album? That's a secret, I smiled. The rights to Lin Yubai's album sold for an astronomical price. I used the proceeds to establish the Lin Yubai Piano Scholarship Fund, dedicated to supporting underprivileged children who dreamed of pursuing music. Lin Yubai, I would never let you leave. I wanted you to have a name. I wanted you to have warmth. I wanted you to have life. I wanted you to be praised. I wanted you to be remembered. I wanted you to receive endless love and gratitude. I wanted you to rest beside your parents with a smile on your lips, Lin Yubai.